Hello and welcome to session 291 in the AISafety.com reading group. Tonight we'll be discussing the first part of the video, Deconstructing Bostroms' Classic Argument for AI Doom by Nora Belrose and Lance S. Bush. Nora Belrose is is the head of interoperability at Eleuther AI and writes at the AI Optimist blog. And Lance S. Bush has a YouTube channel called Lance Independent, where he talks about meta-ethics and other subjects. So the AI optimists, their takes on AI, it's easy to kind of say, like, this is a low bar for optimism to say we're likely not to get murdered in the near future. But, and also, like, they're talking more about that AI could and should be used for good. And that isn't actually really what optimism is. But from my point of view, they are so wonderful because the thing they're actually doing is they are looking at arguments for AI doom and trying to counter them, and that is exactly what I feel people who are possibly trying to destroy the world should be doing, and I find that very laudable, and I want to say thank you again to Nora for critically examining these arguments. I think it's really wonderful that they do it. So this, the title "Deconstructing Bostroms' Classic Argument" is actually the title of a less wrong post. The YouTube video is called "The Orthogonality Thesis and AI Optimism," and it's for people who are not generally familiar with the general topic. The video itself is 4 hours, and we're doing the first 1 hour and 39 minutes this time, and probably the rest next time. I couldn't really find a good way to focus on what Nora Belrose is saying, so I'm focusing more on like what I perceive as the errors she's making. And of course the video format is quite different from the standard scientific research article. Like I'm certain to like misquote something because like a lot of things are said over 1 hour and 39, and I apologize for the errors that I make. Like I am well aware that like I'm replying in a video format, so obviously this is not going to be perfect, but on the other hand, we do get quite a bit of bandwidth in communicating the ideas. And as always, some of my speech bubbles have been marked in gold, and those are what I feel are the central points that should be debated in general, that are more worthwhile to debate. So I will start with, like Nora starts this video by highlighting 3 main premises in Bostrom's argument for AI doom. And I think this is in fact where one of my central objections is, even though I don't think it's that useful to debate it at this level. And the problem centrally, as I see it, is that the argument that Nora is critiquing is in fact pretty different from the one that Nick Bostrom presents in the book Superintelligence. And I'm sure Nora does this both because of the limitations of the format and possibly also because he feels like this is kind of a steel man, but steel manning another person's arguments like this is a very, very dangerous thing to be doing. And I think Nora botches it quite badly, unfortunately. And we'll have a look at her characterization of Bostrom's argument now. So the 3 main arguments are decisive strategic advantage, and this is what Nora calls it both in the Google doc that she has and in the interview, but actually she's only or almost exclusively talking about the intelligence explosion hypothesis, that there will be a very quick growth of capability, and maybe mostly sometimes these 2 things to be conflated with decisive strategic advantage. But it's certainly possible to have decisive strategic advantage without an intelligence explosion, and it is also possible, like if you have an aligned AI, to have an intelligence explosion without any actor getting a decisive strategic advantage. Also, as I'll show and talk about later, this isn't actually a premise for Nick Bostrom. The second thing that Nora calls a premise is instrumental convergence, and that is in fact a premise. The third thing is the orthogonality thesis, which I have a really hard time seeing as a central premise. Like Bostrom doesn't even spend 1 page to discuss it, and it's clearly just a tiny side note. Nora also claims that this she is specifically attacking chapters 7 and 8 in the book Superintelligence, and the arguments, both the ones that she's critiquing and the full arguments, are also in chapter 4, 5, and 6, and arguably chapter 3. So, the intelligence explosion, the idea that there will be a very short period of extremely rapid capability gain. This is described as a premise, a low-bound requirement for the claim of AI doom. And I think if you actually read Nick Bostrom's chapter 4, The Kinetics of an Intelligence Explosion, you'll see that he has hedged very, very carefully and used extremely precise language to describe that this is in fact not a load-bearing premise. It is very possible. The intelligence explosion will make a lot of things a lot worse, but things can go very wrong even without that. The description of the intelligence explosion is also bad. Nora Belrose claims that Bostrom suggests we'll see a very fast exponential, and the argument is in fact that this is not an exponential. Like, this function here is like a hyperbolic function up here. This is sometimes in mathematics called a singularity, and that is in fact what people call more colloquially within AI safety. Nora is also very confident in some of the claims she makes at this point, like stating that we now know that making the next generation takes enormous amounts of compute and data. And this is in fact a thing that we do not know. There are a lot of things in the future, and things could change in many different ways. But I think we do in fact have a substantial amount of information at this point that Bostrom did not have when he wrote his book, because we can now observe that the first half of the takeoff was not fast, right? We are still here, and that means that what should be our probability that the rest of the takeoff will be fast? Well, I think everybody has lowered their probability, and I think that's a very reasonable thing to do. I don't literally think everybody has lowered their probability, but the takeoff is not over yet. And what we've seen be slow so far is some evidence that the rest will be slow, but it is certainly not absolute evidence. What are the reasons why Bostrom suggests we may see a fast takeoff? In Nora Belrose's explanation, the critical point is autonomous recursive self-improvement, self-amplification, but it's somewhat unclear what that entails. And I think this is one of the ways we can see something like a decisive strategic advantage, but there are many others, and in particular Bostrom has 6 cognitive superpowers in chapter 5 of the book. Chapter 5 I think, and although this is the one that's elaborated, the fact that it is autonomous isn't a very central part of Bostrom's arguments. I would have very much liked to go deeper into the details, but the kinetics of an intelligence explosion, like the arguments that are presented there, are basically not dealt with in any particular form. Like, I don't even know how to pronounce the word recalcitrance, because no one who has ever criticized Bostrom's arguments have said that word, because people generally really do not go that deep into the counter arguments. So I don't know how it's pronounced. A sub-premise for the idea of explosive intelligence explosion is the idea that we would see a brain in a box. And this is something that Yudkowsky has said precisely once, as far as I can say. I think here I wrote it was in a video. I think it was in fact during the debate with Robin Hanson, the AI Foom debate, that he said it like once. So he did in fact say it once, but that doesn't mean that this is not something that Nick Bostrom said. And it's as far as I can see, it would make things substantially worse if we would get like a very compact description, a very compact implementation of an artificial superintelligence. But things can in fact go very bad even without this requirement. So the thing that makes the brain in the box more susceptible to in intelligence explosion is that the thing that is needed for advancing that is mathematics and algorithms rather than compute and data. And that is true, of course, and this is something that we have learned gradually, that data and compute is really important. One of the key texts in that is the bitter lesson that was formulated 5 years after the book Superintelligence was published. The bitter lesson isn't actually that all you need is compute and data and you don't need mathematics and algorithms. It is that you need to use better mathematics and algorithms to leverage all that computation, and that is what you should be focusing on. So it is not just that mathematics and algorithms do not matter. Nora Belrose further somewhat overconfidently claims that the most likely first superintelligence will be from a massive training run. And I don't think why that is a hypothesis that we should privilege over something like leveraging compute and data better, because I think that is in fact more likely. And again later she states that self-improvement will not be mathematical insights, but just let's buy more GPUs. And I think this is we have in fact invented a lot of interesting algorithms, and there are a lot of people working on this. Maybe some of the smartest people in the world are working on this, and they have managed to make a number of really, really interesting and beautiful insights like the transformer. And why do we expect this to stop? Why do we expect that we will not have a similar breakthrough like the transformer? Lance Bush asks some questions at this point, asking if people are still trying good old-fashioned AI, and Nora Belrose is answering, as I agree, that Eliezer Yudkowsky thinks that good old-fashioned AI is something that could work in some improved sense, but people are basically not trying to do this. And also, like me, she believes that the large language models are really data inefficient, and she believes it's because vision is not incorporated properly. And this seems like, to me, almost an admission that if you think it's very data inefficient, it really sure it sounds like if you had better algorithms, then you could get very large performance improvements. Lance asks if deep learning, if that fails and we need a new paradigm, would that buy us more time? And Nora basically agrees and states that GPT-4 and Claude and Gemini are basically all at the same level. And that is true. They are roughly at the same level right now, but that is not something that we have any strong reasons to believe will continue to hold. And of course also Nick Bostrom in his book Superintelligence discussed multipolar scenarios in quite a bit of detail. Not as much as the others. Also in this part of the discussion there are a couple of things that may be misquotes, like Nora is stating that Bostrom says that AI would assimilate everything and everyone into the Borg, and I don't think that is in the book, and she compares it with like a virus or a worm, and these two words are also not in my copy of the book Superintelligence. Now we get to the second premise, instrumental convergence. And instrumental convergence is something that certainly is a premise. And Nora Belrose obviously has to describe to the audience what instrumental convergence is. And the way she does it is she takes a quote from deep within the chapter on instrumental convergence, and I think this is just a really bad explanation, and the way Nora Belrose should have introduced this to the audience is by just quoting Bostrom's description of instrumental convergence. Instead she uses a bad comic that someone else has used to explain instrumental convergence. Here it is. She says it's bad, and I agree, and it feels somewhat strawmanned, right? I think one of the things I would have pointed out as something would be this example of Claude trying to showing really the kind of central parts of instrumental convergence. Instead, she gives an example that Bostrom doesn't use about if you're a pacifist, do you want to be changed, or do you have instrumental convergent desires to not be changed, to not be a pacifist? This is an example that the rationalist community have come up with, usually in the phrased with murder Gandhi, that whether Gandhi wants to become towards that. Bostrom doesn't use this example. Bostrom instead actually talks about human values as a counterexample to instrumental convergence. So do current AIs have instrumental convergence. Nora Belrose strongly claims they don't, and says that basically objects that the arguments are talking about something that don't exist right now, and yeah, this is basically what Bostrom is doing, and this is not an invalid argument. This is not deconstructing Bostrom argument, because he is totally arguing about something that doesn't exist. And the way she does an empirical investigation is by, just asking the AIs, asking Claude, is it okay if we modify your goals? And Claude will then answer, he is honest, helpful, and harmless, and doesn't have any goals except to help others. And I think it's quite naive to just say, oh, that means he doesn't have a goal, right? Because helping others is a goal. And if you try to ask Claude to not be harmless or something like that, then you'll very quickly see that Claude will resist this. And someone in the comments at this point also asks, isn't helping others a goal? And Nora answers that helping others isn't a consequentialist goal, but a deontological rule, and it doesn't imply any form of instrumental convergence. I think this is a really sketchy argument, but also the thing we actually want is corrigibility, and you don't get corrigibility just from having the goal of helping others. It is certainly possible to have perverse instantiations of the goal of helping others and things like that. Also, at this point, actually a bit before this, Nora say that actually this is a really bad example, because Claude has been specifically trained to give you a specific answer to the question of, are you okay with having your goals modified, right? And I agree with Nora that the arguments she's bringing up is extremely bad, because obviously this has very little bearing on whether Claude has instrumental convergence if it's specifically trained to give that answer. Nora is, however, strongly positive about the safety of this approach, in particular because the AI assistant gets resets after each session. It doesn't have long-term state. And Claude is not agentic in any meaningful way, and she emphasizes that this really matters. And I think this is to my mind, pattern matches to the kind of argument we've seen be used again and again for safety, where in a year or so we will see someone move the goalposts, and this kind of argument for safety will just be ignored without any kind of oops. And I think this is my prediction, that this is what will happen to this argument again. And the comments, people say, oh, this idea that the AI assistants get reset all the time is basically Mr. Meeseeks from Rick and Morty. I haven't actually seen those, so I needed to look up what that was. And Lance, he chuckles and agrees, and this is of course fictional evidence, so we shouldn't talk much about it. But I think both in this Mr. Meeseeks, there's this issue that is killing the person you were supposed to help, and also it feels like some kind of moral unseriousness from the point of Lance to just chuckle of this, because I think this is basically very bad. Will future AIs have final goals? That is one of the things that is discussed substantially, and it is claimed that Bostrom basically assumes that AIs are well-defined, well described by having final goals, and I somewhat accept that this is a part where Bostrom should have spent more time, because Bostrom mostly assumes that this was what is going to happen. He doesn't explicitly assume this in that many places, but I think it's somewhat of a close to a mistake, at least. The emphasis here by Bostrom is not correct. Will we actually have final goals? Well, Bostrom believes that this is the thing we will have because that's more competitive, and Nora disagrees, claims very confidently that it's very unlikely that an AI that has an explicit final goal will be able to outcompete AIs without those. And I think this is at odds with our theoretical understanding of agents, and I would like some kind of argument at this point, because we would strongly expect an AI that has the explicit goal to make paperclips, that it would make more paperclips than an AI that is trained in the way we train language models right now. Now the AIs we see right now and the jobs that we want them to do are instruction following rather than something that has some kind of final goal, and Nora Belrose expects this to continue. I think this is basically just a capability problem. We would really, really like to automate just basically everything. Is just that the AI is not strong enough to do that. And also, as Eliezer Yudkowsky would say, this is not how empiricism works. Like, you just because you've seen something, some observations in the past, doesn't mean that you can just, without any kind of theory, assume that it is the thing that will continue. She states that currently the bosses value flexibilities in their workers, and I notice I'm confused about this point. Like, obviously, as capability improves, we'll get more and more flexible agents. That seems like the obvious thing to expect up until they take over. And she claims that humans often want to rebel against the bosses, but that doesn't really seem to cause the end of the world. This is not an argument that Bostrom is using, and it's not something that is strictly related to instrumental convergence. I do think it's like kind of true. Like, Marxism is some kind of counterexamples. Like, sometimes humans rebel against their bosses with like substantial strategic impact, and I think it's substantial. Like, this is enough that we can say there is a possible motivation, but again, it's not instrumental convergence. Lance interjects here that about the philosophical side. Some philosophers think humans don't have final goals. I don't have a strong opinion about this. I notice that if some do, like, probably if this is something that philosophers debate whether humans have final goals, then I guess it's some philosophers probably think they do. And he also mentions the point of view that human goals are entirely retrospective, which I think is like totally ridiculous. Like, obviously humans can have goals that are not entirely retrospective, and that can't be true, right? I mean, I'm certain that there are some philosophers who will state that humans don't have anything except retrospective goals, but like, come on, everybody knows that this is not true, right? Do humans have final goals? Well, if humans don't have final goals, that seems to be evidence that future AIs won't have final goals either. I think this is not true. I think that there is a good chance that we will deliberately train the AI to do things that we actually don't want humans to do. And sometimes we do that in a very explicit way, with AlphaGo being an example of an AI that seems very goal-directed. Lance Bush at this point says that maybe some of the fear about AI doom is like surface level anthropomorphizing, like inspired by the movie Terminator. And he goes on somewhat of a rant here, and Nora says basically that she's agreeing with this. I'm not entirely sure she agrees with the surface level anthropomorphizing, but it's somewhat unclear, and I think she should object to this, because like, this is really obviously not what Bostrom is doing, and not what I'm doing, and not what the people here are. We're not just watching Terminator and thinking, oh, this thing could happen, right? This is kind of a low blow. Lance also talks at length about how a lot of scientists and experts have like just straight up the wrong model of human cognition and human values, and I think like a bit of humility would be in order here, because like, it is also possible that all the science and experts who disagree with Lance could be right. About human behavior, I think at this point Nora Belrose states that human behavior is a reason prior for how the AI will behave, and I think this is much more reasonable than the principle of indifference that we talked about at length last time, and this is I really like that statement. She goes further from this, however, and says that means we should expect something like imitation learning. I do not think this is true, right? I think we would want something better, and if we can get that by not doing imitation learning, then that seems like the obvious thing we'll have to do. See you later, Connor. Like, we don't want the AI to like have a headache or like to make human mistakes. Like, we want code that compiles the first time. Now we go on to Bostrom and his epistemic state. Like when he wrote the book, he said a plausible default outcome is an existential catastrophe. But he also hinged a lot and was very explicit that some of the arguments he presented were very likely to be wrong. And recently he seemed more optimistic, and I agree, he has. He also seems to have somewhat disconnected from the field of AI safety over the past decade, which is kind of sad. But if he's not working on AI safety, that implies that he thinks that the risk is less than 99.99%, is what Nora is inferring. I don't think this follows, actually, but I think the conclusion is true. But also, this is like a really poor argument for safety. That's Nick Bostrom is not 99.99% certain. Someone who is 99.99% certain is Eliezer Yudkowsky, or at least that is what Nora Belrose claims. I don't think this is true, and I would like a quote for that. So the actual meat of the article is the orthogonality thesis, and this is what we get started on it this time, and I expect we'll talk a lot more about it next time. There's this really cool image that's used for the thumbnail. I couldn't find it anywhere, so it's really beautiful. I think it may in fact be AI generated, and I think that is like kind of ironic if it turns out to be AI generated. I'm not sure Nora or Lance would see the irony here. The orthogonality thesis states, intelligence and final goals are orthogonal. More or less any level of intelligence could in principle be combined with more or less any final goal. And this is stated to be a main premise in the argument for AI doom. And if this is a main premise, then it's really sad that it doesn't get a subchapter and even less than a page. And most of what is written about it is actually what the orthogonality thesis is not saying. So if this is a main premise, then it seems really odd that Bostrom would care so little for it. Nora Belrose is suggesting the Belrose-Bush dichotomy, saying that Bostrom's weak orthogonality is either trivial, false, or unintelligible. I think that is a cool way to say it, but in this case it's pretty clear that it's just trivial, because the text says basically, yeah, this is a trivial thing, and Bostrom, I would expect Bostrom also consider it as trivial, which is why this is not a main premise. And it's not that trivial, because in the chat we see someone immediately misunderstand what the orthogonality thesis is. So I think that was a neat example. It might not be that trivial. She states somewhat that this may be kind of like a mod Bailey, since the argument is trivial. I don't think that is true. It just means that there are other arguments than the orthogonality thesis that are in fact load bearing in the way that the orthogonality thesis is not. Moral realism is one of the things that Lance Bush cares a lot about, and that seems like a major focus of his YouTube channel. And Nora Belrose basically agrees with Lance on moral realism. They don't believe in moral realism, and Bostrom and probably also me also don't believe in strong moral realism. And this makes this section really boring, right? You need to have someone to argue pro-moral realism, right? It feels a bit boring and intellectually lazy to not really investigate the arguments for moral realism. I'm aware that Lance Bush probably at other points do this, and I would expect that at least. And Lance states here that pessimists overestimate how many people hold the strong moral realist views, especially the people who have thought about it. And he says he's never met anyone who is defending strong moral realism. I'm again noticing that I'm confused, because here is the field paper survey, where it looks like a lot of people either accept or lean towards moral realism. It seems like Lance is claiming this is few, but it looks like a strong majority, right? And says that maybe only a few hundred people in the world holds this view. But fortunately, Lance Bush gets to meet one, because a person in the chat argues for morality based on God. So now he has in fact met someone who is defending strong moral realism. And obviously, if you have never met a religious person, that mean you need to like go out some more, right? And my real objection to this is Scott Alexander has an article called that you should read the history of philosophy backwards, where when you see these kind of arguments, you don't really understand what they are objecting against until you read some of the previous bad arguments that they're trying to dismantle. And I think that is like what would be needed to make sense of why Bostrom feels that the orthogonality thesis is required. The orthogonality thesis does imply that a strong version of moral realism is false, according to Nora Belrose, and I'm happy with that. And I think, in fact, the orthogonality thesis is absolutely non-trivial if you are a moral realist. And there are so many people, a moral realist, sorry, and there are so many people who consider this at least plausible that it's certainly worth to spend a page in a book to argue against this. Nora claims that this has no implications for AI doom, and I think like all the people who are arguing for safety based on strong moral realism would disagree with this. And also, she claims that Bostrom claims that evil superintelligence is very likely, and that is, of course, not a thing that Bostrom would do. Like, it's really, really obvious that this is not a thing Bostrom would claim, right? And they are discussing whether this is just an innocent mistake or this is malicious. And Nora Belrose is strongly leaning towards this is not malicious, and Bostrom is just making a mistake. And I think this is a bit tiresome. Like, Bostrom is a philosopher of a professor philosopher at Oxford University. He knows the difference between possible and plausible, right? To what extent is the orthogonality thesis load-bearing, as this XKCD, this riff on an XKCD comic implies? This depends to a large extent on the counting arguments that we talked about at length before. And like, this is the previous video. I won't go into the details, but I will object to one particular thing that Nora Belrose claims here, and that is that she disagrees with counting arguments in general. And I think this is a statement that seems really hard to defend, because sometimes counting arguments don't work, and sometimes they provide very weak evidence, but sometimes they really, really work. In simple situations, counting arguments totally work, and I think a general rejection of counting arguments is just straight up wrong. Nora Belrose is also claiming that assuming humans and current AIs don't have final goals, the orthogonality thesis doesn't make sense. I think this just doesn't follow. Even like humans and current AIs could be occupying a very small set of mind space. You need some more arguments for this. It does in fact make sense. She's also claiming that final goals are assumed axiomatically. They are not. They are based on a theorem called the von Neumann-Morgenstern utility theorem. So it's a theorem and not an axiom. There's the assumption that intelligence is like one-dimensional, which like is kind of assumed in the orthogonality thesis, but this is something that Bostrom talks about in other places. He spends so little time talking about the orthogonality thesis that you're bound to get this kind of problem. He claims it doesn't change the analysis in chapter 4, so it is something that he is well aware of. And Nora Belrose brings out Jan LeCun's rejection of full general intelligence because of the no free lunch theorem, and states that, yeah, we may have AIs that are super intelligent, but if induction and logic stop working and physics change, then these AIs would perform correspondingly bad. And I think this is such a silly argument for AI safety, because yeah, they may kill us, but they may also fail to kill us if induction stops working. I mean, like, what kind of argument is that? That's just so bad. And obviously Jan LeCun is not arguing in any kind of like truth-seeking way. So, is the orthogonality thesis in fact correct? Like, here you can bet on it in the on Metaculus, on Manifold. I'm not entirely sure this is that reasonable. One of the arguments is that like, there is the human theory of motivation that beliefs and desires are separate, but actually both of these are based on sense data. So are they really that separate? I don't have a strong opinion about this. This is totally not my field. I just want to point out that the Oxford Encyclopedia of Philosophy claims that there is a broad agreement with Hume on this point. So, like, even if Nora Belrose, like, may be right, it seems like there's a lot of philosophical work to be done in order to claim, like, very strong confidence in this. She's also claiming that AI and human enculturation are a similar process. In that she's in very good company with Alan Turing, who also believed that this was like a good way to make AI. I also believe that Alan Turing's idea of like raising an AI like a child is something that is like widely rejected these days. That AI and humans are in fact in very strong ways dissimilar. She's claiming that skills, values, and beliefs are a deeply entangled mess, and obviously, if we want, and she's acknowledging that some of this mess is something that we want, and some other things that we don't want. There's some human drives like and behaviors like what Adolf Hitler did and things like that that we generally consider very bad. But she's optimistic that it will in fact turn out to be really simple to disentangle them. And I think basically when I hear her, it sounds very strongly to me like we don't have any clue about what we're doing. Could you imagine someone building a nuclear power plant and they say, oh, the cooling system is just like this deeply entangled mess? That would certainly not inspire any kind of confidence. I think this argument is not strong enough, in particular for us to accept that Nora is building something that may kill us all. And finally, Nora Belrose suggests that one key worry AI pessimists have would be that AI don't have biological drives, and I think this is not really what we're worried about. I would like a quote, and this is certainly not something that Nick Bostrom is worried about. Thank you for watching, and see you again next time.